Some of my favorite videos to make are ones talking about NHL drafts, whether it's a recent draft or if it's an older draft, and I'm sure you guys could tell with all the draft videos I have made on the channel over the past couple of years. And now today we're going to be doing yet another draft video where I go back and take a look at the 2014 NHL draft and redo the entire first round, and I'm definitely thinking of turning this into a series. So if there is any other NHL drafts that you guys want to see me redraft the first round on, make sure to let me know down in the comment section. And as always, if you guys have been enjoying the content lately, make sure to click that subscribe button and click the bell to turn on notifications so that you never miss a video. Starting off with the 30th overall pick, I have the New Jersey Devils selecting forward Brendan Perlini. Now, they originally took John Quenneville with this pick, and he's only played 33 NHL games, which is the second least out of any player in the first round, so even though Brendan Perlini hasn't turned into a star, he's still an upgrade over Quenneville. Moving on now to the 29th overall pick, I have the Los Angeles Kings selecting Jake Virtanen, who was originally selected 6th overall by the Vancouver Canucks. And with that 29th pick, LA did select Adrian Kempe, but I have him going a little bit higher in this redraft. And even though Jake Virtanen didn't really turn out to be the player that he was expected to be at the NHL level, maybe if he was selected a little bit later and didn't have so much pressure on him, he would have turned out a little bit better. And Jake Virtanen still is a decent top 9 forward anyways. With the 28th overall pick in the 2014 redraft, I have the New York Islanders selecting Adrian Kempe, who, like I said, was originally selected 29th overall by the Kings. And in the actual draft, with this pick, the New York Islanders selected forward Josh Ho-Sang, who really hasn't worked out with the team up until this point in time, so getting Adrian Kempe over him, who is definitely a top 9 forward in the NHL right now, would be a pretty big upgrade. Moving on now to the number 27 pick, I have the San Jose Sharks selecting defenseman Marcus Pettersson, and he doesn't really put up big numbers, but over the past 2 years especially, he has really solidified himself as a steady and reliable top 4 defenseman at such a young age. And originally with this pick, the San Jose Sharks selected forward Nikolaj Goldobin, but obviously he would become a member of the Vancouver Canucks and didn't turn out to be anything at all for the Sharks. So getting Marcus Pettersson instead of Goldobin I think would be awesome for them, and I feel like Pettersson would be a great fit on that blue line right now, as he's more of a steady stay-at-home guy, while Erik Karlsson and Brent Burns are kind of the guys that run wild offensively. Next up, at the number 26 pick, I have the Montreal Canadiens selecting forward Robby Fabbri, and I had a pretty difficult time deciding where I would put Fabbri in this video, because he came in, had a great rookie season with the St. Louis Blues, but then came with the injuries, and then people kind of passed over him in the depth chart, and he was never really able to get going again with the Blues. But now with the Red Wings, after being traded, he has done a fantastic job fitting in and is really thriving in a top 6 role there, so Robby Fabbri definitely has a bright future. So I have him at 26 to the Habs, just taking into consideration everything that's happened in his career so far. With the 25th overall pick, I have the Boston Bruins selecting forward Nick Ritchie, and a lot of people might disagree with me having him ahead of the likes of Robby Fabbri, Pettersson, Virtanen, Kempe, and Perlini. And while I do think Nick Ritchie has been underwhelming as the original 10th overall pick, I don't think he's a bad NHL player by any means, and I think he can definitely be a very good, bottom 6 checking forward who can chip in some offense here and there and play like second power play minutes. And I just feel like he would have been a perfect fit for the Boston Bruins, so that's why I have him at 25. At the number 24 pick, I have Thatcher Demko once again being drafted by the Vancouver Canucks, but this time in the first round as opposed to where they originally got him in the second round. I definitely did debate on putting Thatcher Demko a little bit higher on this list, but I feel like he was just the perfect fit for Vancouver and is obviously the future starting goaltender of that team. And so far this season, Demko is having himself a great rookie campaign, and I'm sure the Canucks wouldn't mind using up their first round pick on him as opposed to Jared McCann. With the number 23 pick in the draft, I have Christian Dvorak being selected by the Colorado Avalanche. Now originally the Avs selected Connor Bleakley with this pick, and he still remains the only player drafted in the 2014 first round to have not played a single NHL game yet. So virtually anyone in this redraft would have been an upgrade, and I'm pretty sure they'd be pumped if they had Christian Dvorak right now instead of selecting Bleakley. With the 22nd pick in the draft, I have the Penguins selecting forward Danton Heinen. Now Pittsburgh originally selected Kasperi Kapanen with this pick, but he obviously got traded to Toronto in the Phil Kessel deal. So who knows, maybe if Pittsburgh selected Danton Heinen, he'd be a Maple Leaf right now, but whatever would have happened, I have him going 22nd in this redraft. With the 21st overall pick, I have the St. Louis Blues selecting forward Kevin Fiala, and he's a guy who already has had a 20-goal season, but his stint in Minnesota hasn't been the greatest so far after being traded. He was scratched this season for a game, and that was honestly very surprising to me, but of late he has been a lot better, and he's a guy who's already had a 20-goal season under his belt. With the 20th overall pick, I have the Chicago Blackhawks selecting Tony DeAngelo, who was originally selected by the Tampa Bay Lightning, and then changed teams a couple times before now finally finding his home with the New York Rangers. But who knows, if he was drafted by Chicago, maybe they would have kept him around the whole time, and he's turned out to be a pretty pretty good defenseman. Moving on now to the 19th overall pick, I have the Tampa Bay Lightning selecting forward Jared McCann. Now with this pick, they originally selected Tony DeAngelo, but I feel like Jared McCann, the player he is now, would be a really good fit for Tampa Bay. He's a low maintenance guy, he can play third line, he can play second or even first line if you have an injury, and a guy you can put on the penalty kill and power play. He's basically a Swiss Army knife out there. Next up at 18th overall, I have the Minnesota Wild selecting forward Ondrej Kase. Now Minnesota originally selected Alex Tuch with this pick, but I have him going a little bit higher, and as everybody knows, Tuch was scooped up by Vegas in the expansion draft. And who knows, if they had Kase, maybe the same thing would have happened and Kase would have been a member of the Golden Knights, but either way, he's a pretty solid NHL player and I have him at 18 to the Minnesota Wild. Moving on now to number 17, I have the Philadelphia Flyers selecting Alex Tuch, who I just talked about, and Alex Tuch is a guy I feel like a lot of people kind of forget about because he was injured for the first part of this season. And I remember like halfway through last season before they got Mark Stone, Tuch was like the leading scorer for the Vegas Golden Knights. He was fantastic, and even though Philadelphia got Travis Sanheim with this pick and he's turned out to be a great defenseman, I'm pretty sure they'd be happy if they got Tuch too. With the 16th overall pick, I have the Columbus Blue Jackets selecting forward Kasperi Kapanen, who has really turned out to be a great NHL player and a very capable top 6 forward. Now originally with this pick, the Blue Jackets selected forward Sonny Milano, and he hasn't really been extremely good for them so far in his career, so I'm pretty sure they'd be pumped to get a guy like Kapanen instead. Next up, we have the 15th overall pick, and I have the Detroit Red Wings selecting Travis Sanheim. Now obviously in real life, Detroit got a pretty good steal with Dylan Larkin at 15, so this is a bit of a downgrade, but Detroit is definitely a team that needs help on the blue line, and me as a fan of the Red Wings, I would be pretty okay with us getting Travis Sanheim. With the 14th overall pick, I have the Dallas Stars selecting Oskar Lindblom. Now this video is based on their career so far and not really their potential, but considering how good Oskar Lindblom has been this season, I had to put him at least in the top 15. And he did have a good season last year with 17 goals, but so far this season he's been great with 16 points in 23 games, and looks like he's well on his way to having like a 30-goal season and maybe 50 to 60 points. Next up at the number 13 pick, I have the Washington Capitals selecting Jakub Vrana, and this is exactly where he was selected in real life. I just feel like he's the perfect fit for that Washington team. With the 12th overall pick, I have the Arizona Coyotes selecting Kevin Labanc. Now originally Arizona selected Brendan Perlini with this pick, so I'm pretty sure they'd be pumped to get a guy like Kevin Labanc instead. With the 11th overall pick, I have the Nashville Predators adding to that already insane blue line with Brandon Montour, who in my opinion is a very underrated defenseman. Now originally with this pick, Nashville selected Kevin Fiala, so I definitely think Brandon Montour is a big upgrade there. And now we're getting into the top 10, and with the 10th overall pick, I have the Anaheim Ducks selecting forward Sam Reinhart, who was originally the 2nd overall pick in this draft. And while Sam Reinhart is kind of looked at by some people as a disappointment because you expect a 2nd overall pick to become like a franchise level talent, and while Sam Reinhart hasn't done that, he is a very good NHL player, had a breakout season last year, and has continued that on into this season. He's a pretty solid player away from the puck as well, and Anaheim would be pretty pumped to get him instead of their original pick in Nick Ritchie. Now with the 9th overall pick, I have the Winnipeg Jets selecting centerman Nick Schmaltz, and I think this would be an amazing fit. While they did get a good player originally in Nikolaj Ehlers, I have him going a little bit higher. But still, they'd be getting a great player in Nick Schmaltz, and what is Winnipeg's biggest weakness right now? It's, in my opinion, the 2nd line center spot, and I think Schmaltz would fill in that role perfectly. With the 8th overall pick, I have William Nylander once again being drafted by the Toronto Maple Leafs. He's a guy who kind of gets a lot of unfair criticism at times, and I hear a lot of Leafs fans wanting him to be traded, which in my opinion is kind of ridiculous because his only bad stint in Toronto was honestly last season after finally coming over after the contract dispute. But so far this season, he's back to the old William Nylander. I think he's definitely going to have a 60+ point season, and he's a very underrated part of this team. With the 7th overall pick, I have the Carolina Hurricanes selecting forward Nikolaj Ehlers. Now originally Carolina selected Hayden Fleury, and he's been kind of underwhelming for being a top 10 pick. And could you imagine adding Nikolaj Ehlers to their already exciting young forward core of dynamic players? I think that would be a pretty sick fit. With the 6th pick, I have the Vancouver Canucks selecting Victor Arvidsson, who was originally a 4th round pick by the Predators, one of the biggest deals of the 2014 draft. And could you imagine adding Victor Arvidsson to a team that is already loaded with young talent? I think that'd be an amazing fit. And while they did select Jake Virtanen here, and yeah, he's a fan favorite and has been getting better every season, Victor Victor Arvidsson is obviously the much better player. With the 5th overall pick, I have the New York Islanders selecting Aaron Ekblad, the original number 1 overall pick from the 2014 draft. And while yes, I guess you can kind of call him disappointing as the number 1 overall pick because he hasn't really been a superstar yet, he's still a very good young defenseman with tons of room to grow. And he hasn't really had the best injury luck up until this point in time as well, and considering the Islanders selected Michael Del Cole here, I think they'd be pretty pumped to get Aaron Ekblad instead. Okay, with the number 4 overall pick, I have the Calgary Flames selecting Dylan Larkin, but I gotta clear something up here because I just remembered that I completely forgot Sam Bennett and left him off this entire list. And yes, he wouldn't be a top pick, but he definitely would have been in the first round probably, and in like the 20 to 30 range, so I'm not quite sure where I would have him because I'd have to redo this whole thing and players would have to be bumped off the list, so I'm not going to go back and change anything, but just know I did forget him. That mistake is on me. But now, getting back to Dylan Larkin on the Flames, Michael Backlund is a pretty good second line center for them right now, but could you imagine bumping him down to the 3rd line and then having Dylan Larkin run that second line and the second power play unit? That'd be pretty sick for them. Now moving on to number 3, I have Brayden Point going to the Edmonton Oilers, and yes, they are losing out on Leon Draisaitl, but you are still getting a pretty amazing player in Brayden Point who would do a fantastic job as the second line center on the team or even a winger to Connor McDavid. Last year, Point had an amazing breakout season with 40 goals and 90 plus points, and this year he's off to a little bit more of a slow start, but I will give him the benefit of the doubt because he did miss the first about week and a half to 2 weeks with that injury. I think Brayden Point is definitely a franchise talent and a top 3 player from this draft class. Moving on now with the 2nd overall pick, I have the Buffalo Sabres selecting David Pastrnak, who this season has really broke out into a superstar and one of the best players in the entire NHL. Him and Brad Marchand have honestly just been ridiculous together this season, and they make that Boston team so dangerous, and it's honestly a real possibility that David Pastrnak could score like 60 goals this season and be up there around like 110 to 120 points. He's that good. And now to finish out the video, no surprise here, I have Leon Draisaitl going number 1 overall to the Florida Panthers. And after last season, everybody knew how good Draisaitl was, 100 points, 50 goals, one of only 2 players in the league last year to score 50, but this season he has taken that to a whole nother level. In 26 games, Draisaitl has 16 goals and 32 assists for 48 points already. He's almost at 50 points and we're not even 30 games into the season. And you're always going to have those people that say Draisaitl is only this good because he plays with Connor McDavid, and obviously Draisaitl does benefit from that, but McDavid benefits from playing with Draisaitl as well, and I firmly believe if Draisaitl played on any other team in the league, he'd still be a franchise talent and one of the best players in the NHL. So that is going to wrap up today's video. I really hope you guys did enjoy, and once again, I'm sorry to all Flames fans for kind of disrespecting Sam Bennett and forgetting about him, but I did switch this list up so many times when going over it, so I must have just forgotten to put him back in. But again, for me, he would definitely be in like that 20 to 30 range because he has been a pretty solid player. Not the superstar he was supposed to be when drafted, but still a solid player. And with all that being said, thank you guys so much for watching today's video. If you did enjoy, please make sure to drop a like on it and subscribe to the channel for daily NHL content, and I will see you guys all in the next video.